Hello my fellow geeks, I'm Mark, and today on Elite Geek I'm going to show you my review of the Anycubic Mega Zero 2.0. I needed just like a budget printer. I have some big printers, I have a lot of resin printers mostly, but I needed a just cheap FDM printer to set to the side and print some terrain. I've been playing more and more 40K and I just wanted to be able to print things like my own little boxes and some other terrain that I'll show you in the future. I've got it going just to be able to fill out our tables. I also used it to print the pieces for my daughter's birthday cake to go on top, so that was pretty cool. Anyway, I'm going to show you the pros of it and the cons that I had. I kind of had a love-hate relationship with this printer for a while, but now it's going great. And I had two issues. I'll show you both. One was just stupid on my fault. One was kind of a problem with the printer, but it's a really easy fix. So as I mentioned, this is the Mega Zero 2 printer for freedom to make new upgrades. So if you have a Mega Zero 1, the big things that it improves, it's pretty much the same build volume, but it has a heated bed, which I consider absolutely essential. You go down here, it's a 220 by 220 by 250, so it's a pretty good size for the price. It's a pretty good size. I'll skip down here. The other big thing that it has is an improved extruder, which still gave me a problem. Actually, of these three things, 2 out of 3 were a problem. I've never worried about power loss continuing. It's pretty standard in printers now. It is nice to know that it goes, but I don't think you're ever going to get a really good connection after a print fails with resuming. And I do really like the leveling. So I'm going to just show you, I just took some pictures as I was putting this together of what I've got. So I'm just going to kind of walk through those. So I didn't want to try and film this whole thing as I was going through because that would make this even longer, and you really don't need it. It's so easy to put together. It came really nicely packaged. The instructions were very easy to follow. One step at a time. I'll show you the parts that I did have a little bit of problem with and some things to look out for if you're putting it together too quickly, because I know a lot of people won't want to read the manual. But the base comes out, came with the magnetic plate attached. Installing a frame was a little tricky. I didn't want to set it on its side, so finally I just pushed it over to the edge of the table and was able to get the frame on top and connected. The tools that it came with were pretty nice, and the bolts went in just fine. Connecting the power supply was also quite easy. I did have to move the arm. I put one in, moved the arm down here, just moved it out of the way because it was covering over where the other bolt hole was, and that connected in. Super easy. The spool holder presses and connects, but I actually did it backwards the first time. So just so you know, the spool hangs off the back of the printer, not off of the front. This was the only part that I found to be very tricky, getting this T connector on. I got it screwed on just a little bit and then fit it into the rail. I did have to use an Allen wrench to kind of get it to lock in place, but once I did that, it connected. That was the hardest part, honestly. Yeah, power connectors, make sure you run it under the rail. I imagine some people have connected that over. These are XT60 connectors. Yep, under the rail. These I'm not super fond of. It doesn't matter what order you connect these in. These are just a switch to let you know when the bar connects here. Not let you know, but let the printer know when it clicks. That's how it finds the home setting. Because of that, it doesn't really matter which wire goes on the two ends. It doesn't matter. And then the Z connector, this is what runs the motor. All plugged in, ready to just go and connect. One thing I did have is I just don't really care for the way these are. I tried to pull the sleeve back as far as I could to make sure I had a really good connection. I haven't had any problem with them coming off or anything. I feel like that could be a little better design. But see, once they get on, I've done, I don't know, 30 prints with it since then, and it hasn't come off. XT60 connector, JST locking connector, I think is what that is. And then the magnetic plate. I'm gonna cover this in a little bit, but I am not really a fan of this magnetic plate. So last thing you need to make sure you do is set this power. Mine defaulted to 230 volts. Now it's safer to do that for them to ship it that way, because if you plug in 115, it probably won't ruin anything versus the other way around, but make sure if you are in the US, you switch it down to 115 volts. Then it will power on. I've just used the default firmware. I looked the other day and don't see any newer firmware, but everything seems fine. It's a nice display. The pixels that look like they're out are not out. I didn't have any problem. That's just a refresh from the camera. And then home everything, and then walk through the leveling process. It's in the manual. It's very easy, but it steps around the corners for you, and you're just able to adjust the knobs underneath until you get, I will say, compared to some other printers that I've used, it works best when it's very low to the surface, at least with this magnetic plate on. I make it tighter than I normally would. So I can move the paper out, but it's dragging quite a bit, and that seems to have worked better for me overall with the printing process. Preheat PLA, I just used the default spool here that it came with. I did the first test print. It goes in, it feeds through just fine without any issues. Did a test print of the owl. This is all built in. I recommend doing this first just to make sure once you get everything leveled, make it easy and it's all set and ready to go. Now the quality of this was okay. I don't know what layer height this was. I don't know exactly what the settings for this were. I did get some stringing. I did get some visible layers. These are pretty thick layers, and it may have gone just a little fast, so I got some distortion. So this owl is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination at all, but it was a successful first print, and the quality I've gotten out of my terrain pieces since then have been plenty good enough. So here's an example of what it looks like when I'm doing a leveling test. See, there's a little bit of separation there. This is where when I redid this and set the little less space, made the paper tighter, I got better results. And then it will go through, and here's one of the pieces of terrain that we'll look at here in a minute. So there's the setup and some first test prints. As I mentioned, I printed a bunch of these cargo containers off of Thingiverse, some other things, and I'll show you the big terrain that I printed. And then now I'm also going to show you the problems that I had with this and how we fixed it. So here's the printer itself. It's not very loud. I actually work right over there, just through that door. And I'll close the door, but here I'll turn it on so you can hear how loud it is, kind of. My microphone probably picks up a little of that, but it's just not very loud, even when it's printing. This is one of the big prints I was talking about. Now this is where this plate is nice, because in order to remove this magnetic plate comes off and it just peels off of there so easily. I'm glad that worked because I left that on just in case. Now the quality here, it's not perfect, but you know what, for the terrain pieces, and with I've done absolutely no tweaking on this thing at all. I just took it out of the box and started printing. It does a pretty darn good job. It's got terrain, and if I prime this and paint it up, it's gonna look great on the tabletop, which is really all I'm looking for on this. And it's got the capability to do more. It just is already doing, with no effort, what I want. Now this piece should come off, okay. Oop, there we go. So that comes off, and it comes off pretty clean. But this is one of the parts that I've had an issue with. Now, I've had a couple of issues. One, I've found it's a little hard to get lined up. See there? It's hitting the side there. So it's not really hard, but it's a little tough to get lined up. Now, the magnets do seem to line up with the edges appropriately, but sometimes I'll throw it on and it just won't, it'll rub, and I've had it happen on both sides. Not a big deal. You just have to be careful when you take this off, you put it back on before you start to print. Just make sure it's not rubbing. The other problem I had with it, I almost thought was going to cause me to return it, because after I did a whole bunch of prints, and I printed, here's another one of these, I printed a bunch of these for containers, I could not get this thing to level for the life of me. Like, all of a sudden it just wouldn't level. And I had paper, I have a paper here, and I would try and level it, and I would level the edges, and then it would end up all over, and it was a disaster. Like, I couldn't get it to work. And it ended up being, once I peeled this up just to look at it, I don't remember what I was doing. It turned out there was some filament had gotten underneath here, and it was causing, especially this corner, it was right here, so it just wouldn't sit. So I was trying to level it with that filament underneath, and it wouldn't level. Once I took that out and I re-leveled it, and like, oh, well, that was dumb. That was super easy. Now, speaking of leveling, I will show you how easy this is. So I'm gonna home it, and you can hear how loud it is to home. I do like these controls too. It's very easy to use. I've had some of the printers in the past that just were difficult to navigate, and here you'll be able to hear if I home all. See, I'm sure you can hear that through the microphone, but it's just not very loud. I mean, of all things, my resin printer was louder than this. One of them that I reviewed not very long ago, that thing was so loud I could hear it on another floor. This thing I print all night on and haven't had any issues at all. So there's homed, and that's set pretty well. And then we have under prepare, we have level corners. Level corners. And that makes it really nice so you can use your paper, and it's gotta be pretty tight though. I found it tighter than I will with most printers is where this adjustment will be. And I think it's because this is textured. So I make sure it's pretty tight under here compared to my printers with glass. I make the paper really, really tight. But then what's nice is this next corner button, it'll just go and move from one corner to another all the way around. And I'll just go through that a couple times until I get it all adjusted just right. So once I figured out the problem with the filament underneath the magnetic plate here, like, okay, I can print on this again. Like, let's get this review done. Then I printed one overnight. Let's do a big print, and this happened. Now, when I came back in, the printer head was up here, and there was nothing feeding through. After doing some digging, I found the problem was actually in the extruder. There's a set screw that holds this main gear. You see this gear right here? It holds onto a metal piece here that's actually the gear that feeds the filament. That had come loose. I'm going to show you here in just a minute exactly how to fix that, because that ended up being a very easy fix too. Okay, so for the extruder problem, I will link this down below. This is the video that I watched that I saw what was happening, and you can watch the whole thing here. We'll just click through, and he's taking the extruder apart. I'm pretty sure this is a Mega Zero 1 and not a 2, because it is just a little bit different, but it was totally made it so I can see what was going on. So you pop this gear out, and then you've got the extruder gear, and it's a little bit different on the 2, but you can see here, see that has come loose, and that set screw basically has come loose. So pop it out, fix that set screw. You can watch this to see a little more detail. It is a little bit different on the 2, but the process was exactly the same and the problem was exactly the same. So go give this guy a like, because he's only got 13 subscribers, but he helped me. So there you go. Once I sorted out those 2 issues, I was good to go. The one was just stupid, and I'll probably try a different build plate. I'll either get glass or get a PIE sheet for it eventually. I'm not sure which. Just not really a fan of those magnetic plates, but that's my personal opinion. I'll say I'm using Cura with this. Now in Cura, I've got a Mega Zero 2 set up here, and if you add a printer, you add a non-network printer, you have Anycubic, and the Mega Zero is here, and you can add that, and it will work mostly. You need to then go in and manage it and make a couple of changes. Main thing is the Mega Zero did not have a heated bed, so you have to turn on the heated bed. The other thing that I didn't really care for is that it does like a test line on the side, and I didn't care for that, so I've removed that from the G code here. So I am not an expert at G code. I just kind of figured out how to remove it and get it in place. But I will copy my start in G code into a file that you can copy and paste. If you want to use it to get rid of that initial line, I would probably just use this to start out with. And then if you want to adjust it to get rid of that line, you can do that. Took me a couple tries to get it working just the way I liked, but that's a personal opinion. But I'll say this printer definitely serves its intended purpose. Everything is ready to go. If I have something I want to print, I can just throw it in Cura real fast, export the file. The one other thing I didn't mention, it uses the micro compact flash cards, or not compact, there's dating myself. Micro SD cards, the little bitty ones. And I actually prefer SD cards, so I don't have to use an adapter. Minor things, but my laptop that I use for this has a full-size card, so I have a stack of adapters here. It's not a big deal. But if you found this useful, leave a like and a comment down below. I actually have some more printer reviews. I realized I've never reviewed my Photon Mono or Mono X. Like, I use those every day, and I haven't actually reviewed them. I just kind of started using them, and I've reviewed other models, but I haven't reviewed those, so those are coming here soon. I know a lot of you are on the channel because of the resin printers, but you know what, sometimes for some things, an FDM printer is just handy. So, you know what, a budget FDM printer like this might not be a bad idea for you to pick up. And my gosh, is the post-processing so much easier on FDM. I definitely underestimated how much work resin printers were going to be. But until next time, remember, if you're going to be a geek, be an elite geek with a resin printer probably, but it doesn't hurt to have an FDM around also.